is where we are located. And you can see that we had only 18 schools, 18 jurisdictions, I'm sorry, stayed no change in 8th grade. And then if you'd like to go into more details about these scores, you're more than welcome to go onto either of our websites. You can go onto Aussie's main website to get more details, and you can break it down oftentimes through things like demographics like race, male, female, students with disabilities, English language learners. You can see those different scores, and you can break it down that way. And you can also go onto our nation's report card, and there is the Data Explorer as well, and you can see across the country. Just as a good note, there, like as Stephanie mentioned, we have a small sample this year for NAEP. I've gotten some emails in the past few weeks, half a dozen or more, about schools asking when are we getting our NAEP data. If I have not already contacted you or your school, you are not participating in NAEP. So you can check that off your list. It's a very small sample. I've already contacted everybody. I've been in contact. So please, like if you don't see anything about NAEP this year for your school, you are not in the sample. Just as a good note. So, and then I will pass it back to Rachel, and she's going to take us into our school year test administration.
These are slides that I think you've seen sometime before, but we like to ground ourselves in where we are and what we're looking forward to. So we're going to just talk briefly about the testing windows and your responsibilities as an LEA assessment manager. Our testing season begins this mid-February and flows all the way through May 26th. We begin with access for ELs, and if you've been following our NGA bulletins, you know that Assad has been taking us through that process already, because it's started even though the testing window has begun. After that, for those select schools, we have NAEP, followed by MSAA and DLM, our alternate assessments. And then we have the largest lift, our Park and DC science exams beginning April 3rd and continuing through May. This next slide is just a different visual, a different way of presenting the information. So if you're a chart person, you may have preferred the former slide. If you're a calendar or picture person, you may like this slide. We'll be distributing these slides after the meeting. So if you want one or the other, don't worry, they will get posted. We'll send out that information to you. As LEA assessment managers, you have responsibilities that carry you from August all the way through the end of the school year, ranging from results dissemination to technology setup. This is another way to look at what your responsibilities may include. And this is available on the Test Coordinator Resources page on our website. On that same website, we have the assessment coordination timeline. The yellow boxes are those responsibilities that LEA assessment managers carry out. What they need, other actions that they participate in but are not responsible for, like training, like this, are in the darker blue boxes or the circles. And then the lighter blues are what schools have to do. So what you will be assisting your LEAs in doing. The pink boxes are shipments that you'll receive of testing materials. And the darkest blue circles are what Aussie is responsible for. If you haven't done so already, I encourage a reading, it's riveting, I promise, of our Coordinating 22-23 statewide assessments. It's a handbook for LEA assessment managers. It doesn't replace the specific assessment trainings you'll get throughout the spring, but it does a really good job of grounding you in what you need to do, what might come next, and what happens if. Because as LEA assessment managers, you need to know the big picture, including a lot of the smaller details. LEA assessment coordinators are responsible for understanding very intimately one particular assessment. So assessment managers, whole big picture, assessment coordinators, one particular assessment. And then those two help the school-based testing and test administrators. You may find in your LEA that you as the LEA assessment manager are also an assessment coordinator. Or you may find that you are the assessment manager and there's the same assessment coordinator for Park, DC Science, MSAA, and DLM. So these don't or will not necessarily be absolutely individual roles, but the responsibilities do vary a little bit. It's also important that as LEA assessment managers, you coordinate with your non-public companions, cohorts. I'm gonna look for another C word, nothing's coming right now, to make sure that the students you have at non-publics are also getting the assessments. We do like to stay in touch, so if you've not completed the contact information form, which has been sent out in multiple bulletins, please fill that out. Or you can also email us, and we just want to make sure we're getting in touch with the right people. And should we need to assist in any way, we can reach out, right person, right time, especially if there are people in multiple roles. The assessment training calendar picks up in full. Again, there have been access trainings, but there are more beginning in January. So through January, you'll see the access coordinator and the test administrator training. MSAA has trainings coming up. We like to keep you busy right up until Park, and then like there's one training in Park. So we just keep you busy with trainings. We want to make sure you have all the information. This year we have multiple options for trainings. A lot are hybrid. Just be sure to check out the test cord or the training schedule on the test coordinator resources page. We have made some updates, so they are changing. So keep checking back, and then you can register just as you did for this meeting through an Eventbrite page. Before you can administer a test, and before anything really gets rolling, you actually have to do test security training and modules. So I'm going to hand it over to Lavinia, and she'll go through what that training looks like.
Hey, hello, good afternoon. I am Lavinia, and I am going to go over the test security training modules. Some of you may recall from last year that there were a set of training modules that you would take in lieu of attending a test security training. As you can see from here, these are the names of the modules. They will be available to you shortly on our webpage. There will be an introductory module, Module 0, which is the assessment training module overview. And then there will be 6 other modules that you will go through so that you can then move on to the quiz that is available. All LEA test integrity coordinators, LEA test coordinators, non-public school test coordinators, including those responsible at the LEA for access, alternate access, MSAA, DLM, DC Science, and Park are required to view these modules and take and pass the test. The modules follow the order of activities in the assessment coordination timeline that Rachel showed you previously. And in those modules, when you receive them, they will be recorded so you can listen to them as you watch them. We'll also provide you with a PDF version of the slides, as well as a complete transcript. just a reminder, the LEA Test Integrity Coordinator and the LEA Test Integrity Coordinator are the same role. The LEA Test Integrity Coordinator is the legal term that we use, while the LEA Test Coordinator is what we use for administration purposes. All LEA assessment managers, LEA test coordinators, non-public test coordinators will complete the test security training each year. For this year, if you are a returning coordinator, you may complete the modules and certification quiz asynchronously, meaning you don't have to attend the trainings that we're going to have in December, January, February. Once you make these modules available, notify you of them in our NGA bulletin. You're a returning coordinator, you go right to the modules, take the test, and then you do not have to attend an actual live test security training. If you are a new coordinator, you must participate in a live training option, which we will provide. We will have an in-person and a webinar that you, if you're new, that you can attend. So we will go through these slides with you during one of those webinars. Once you complete the training modules, you will need to take a quiz and a certification form that verifies that you have reviewed and understood all content. A score of 80% or higher will serve as the official attendance and completion of the 2023 test security training. So there's a total of 120 points in that quiz, so you're going to have to get 80% or higher. Keep in mind that if school test security plans will not be approved, if the LEA assessment manager or the LEA test coordinator that's listed in that plan did not complete the test security training and pass the quiz. Final note, the training materials that we provide can be used as a starting point, but it is imperative that the LEA trainings should include both LEA and school-specific information. For example, in your training, you will give specific information about what the process will be for picking up and returning materials and who is assigned to one classroom or another. We won't be able to do that information because we do not know your school or LEA specific information. Individuals responsible for submitting that school test security plan are required to be trained prior to developing their plans. As we said, that LEA assessment coordinator and LEA test coordinator, school test coordinator, they're the ones who will be reviewing the modules and taking and passing the quiz. And then they can submit the plan. And we will check to make sure that it is a passing score on the quiz. And you'll have multiple attempts to pass that quiz. Because we're going to provide you the slides, there's going to be audio recording, there's a PDF of the slides, and there will be a transcript of the slides. It's pretty much an open book quiz that you're taking, so you should be able to get through the modules and pass that quiz 1, maybe 2 maximum attempts. Okay? If you have any questions, though, feel free to reach out. You can contact me if you have questions or comments about what's in the modules. And we will also provide office hours for LEA test integrity coordinators for support with any questions or concerns you have related to test security preparation. So if there are a few takeaways is you must view the modules, pass the quiz. Then you submit your school test security plan. If you submit that school test security plan and you have not passed the quiz, your school test security plans are not going to be reviewed. If they're not reviewed, then there's not an opportunity for it to be approved. And if it's not approved, then you cannot move forward with testing. Any questions thus far? Okay.
In the chat that you made a voiceover for folks to get first.
Right. We just have to get to the chat.
The chat question was, will we have access to the modules prior to attending the live training? And the response to that is the first live training will take place on Tuesday, December 13th. We anticipate that the modules will be available by the end of next week.
Thank you, Yolanda. Appreciate that. And so next steps for test security, and this is talking about December, January, but I'm also going to throw February in there. December 13th, which Yolanda just shared, will be our first test security training. That's for our new test coordinators. We have another one in January and then another one in February. You can refer to the November 30th NDA bulletin for our state assessment training schedule. That's where you can register for one of the 3 upcoming webinars. And we will put that in that was already put in the November 30th NJ bulletin, and it will repeat in the next upcoming NJ bulletin as well. Okay, I'm going to now pass this off for assessment policy to Stephanie.
Thanks, Lavinia. And I would just like to note the slide that Lavinia just went over, the checklist of activities between December, January, February will be a recurring theme throughout this presentation, but also we'll definitely pull out all of that information for each assessment and provide it in a checklist format for folks so you know kind of what's on your plates between now and the next time we meet for the February NGA meeting, because there is a lot that will be happening throughout December, January, mainly January and February. But now I am going to talk a little bit more about assessment policies for this year, and I'll go pretty quickly because we have talked about many of these things in previous meetings, and of course the slides will be available. The one thing I wanted to remind folks is that there are a number of policies that the Office of Assessments has released for the 22-23 school year. These policy documents help support LEAs and schools in successful implementation of the statewide assessments. The first link here is the 2022-23 statewide assessments participation and performance policy. We should probably come up with a shorter name for it, but that policy will outline what assessments are required of students in each grade level or grade band, as well as some policy considerations for students who may be taking accelerated math courses in middle school, for example. And that policy also outlines how participation rates are calculated for the school, LEA, and state level for awareness. The 2022-23 test security guidelines are posted on our website currently as well, and those outline the responsibilities of Aussie, of LEAs, and of schools in maintaining test integrity and test security. It's a pretty lengthy document, but pretty important. So I do encourage you to go out to the website and take a look at the test security guidelines so you are aware of the DC laws and regulations governing the administration of statewide assessments. The third resource linked here are the Aussie testing accommodations guides. This is a set of 3 guides. There's part 0, part 1, and part 2. Part 0 outlines accessibility features, which are available to all students, and as well as administrative considerations that can be provided for all students. Part 1 of the guides outlines accommodations available for students with disabilities. So those students who have an IEP or a 504 plan. What the guides do is create a crosswalk between the accommodations that appear in SEDS, the statewide, the special education database, and what those accommodations are called on each of these statewide assessments, including Access, MSAA, DLM, PARC, and DC Science. So part 1 of the guides is for students with disabilities. Part 2 of the guides goes through that same crosswalk of SEDS versus the accommodations for students who are English learners. Please note that students who are English learners with disabilities are eligible for both accommodations for students with disabilities as well as accommodations for English learners. So as the LEA assessment managers, it's really important for you all to be aware of and use these resources as you are mapping out administration in your schools and LEAs and determining the appropriate accommodations for students on each of the assessments. And actually, this slide does go over some of the information that I just said, but the 3 testing accommodations guides are available on our website and show alignment between SEDS, Special Education Data System, and accommodations on statewide assessments. And I'm sure that Assad will go over this when he comes up in a few minutes, but one thing to note about assigning accommodations that we really like to reiterate and stress is that one, accommodations given to students on statewide assessments should be consistent with what they are using in daily instruction and classroom assessments. And 2, they should have the ability to practice with those statewide accommodations before the actual administration of the assessment. That can be done through practice tests that are available for all of the assessments. And at this point, I will turn it over to Assad to talk a little bit more about some policy things and then start getting into assessment specific details.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. Our first topic that we're going to go into is alternate assessment, eligibility, determination, and appeals. So LEAs that have submitted applications for review by October 14th should have already received those determinations in SEDS and QuickBase. Any applications that were received after October 14th will be reviewed during the appeal window, which is right now. And you will see final determinations for everyone by January 9th of next year. And some assessment specific guidance on access and alternate access for ELS registration, which is the pre-ID file. Large file uploads were due last Friday. The button for this option has been removed. You will need to manually enter students by this Friday. Additional instructions are provided on the homepage of the pre-ID assessment QuickBase application. For any LEAs that have reached out to me separately, you are all set and your file has already been submitted. Please do not email me if this application is not under your QuickBase profile. You will need to submit a OST ticket to gain access. I do not manage access to these applications. Reclassified students that should not be on your roster should be corrected via an OST ticket prior to submitting your pre-ID file. The students will remain on the roster and they will be removed during the certification process, which occurs after administration. These students will not count towards participation since they are not EL and they did not take the assessment. I also may be reaching out to LEAs directly between now and the 16th just to clean up or correct any data that looks like it may need correction. Stephanie just went over the accommodation guides. Should you need support with accommodations for your students in relation to access, all access, or for the pre-ID file, please first use these testing accommodation guides. After you go through them completely, you can follow up with me with any questions or concerns that you may have. For test preparation and training, in preparation for access administration, the training courses need to be completed through the WIDA secure portal. If you are a returning test coordinator or test administrator involved with access for ELS paper, kindergarten access, or alt access, you will need to retake the speaking scoring training course and its corresponding quiz every year. Test coordinators who also serve as test administrators must complete the required trainings as well. It is recommended that these courses be completed by the Friday before test administration, which is February 10th, but you can start them as soon as possible with them being available now. There is not a separate training course. If you are just looking for the online grades 1 through 12 speaking domain, you can access this section through the online grade 1 through 12 course. And lastly, for access, I leave you with a checklist to help you keep track of all the items you will need to take action on prior to access administration. Just a friendly reminder that we are in the middle of the appeals window for alternate assessment eligibility, so please make sure to correct or submit any additional documentation or evidence that will help your students during the appeals process. Second. Also, please do your due diligence to have the pre-ID file submitted for your students by the deadlines. Student registration information will be delivered to WIDA shortly after the windows close. Please take note that the access trainings are for new coordinators and administrators. And moving on to MSAA, which is a very quick reminder or update that there is a training available on Wednesday, February 1st of next year. As more information becomes available, you will be informed via the NGA bulletin. So please keep an eye out for future releases. As of right now, the focus is access, but if you have any questions about MSAA, please field them directly to me. And I'm just gonna leave a few moments to see if there are any questions before I hand it over to Chelsea. Is there anything in the chat? No? No?
Yes, there is now.
Oh, there is now?
There is a question that for all assessment eligibility determinations for students that were denied in the initial review, what is the best method to get further explanation or notes on why a student was denied if it is not clear based on the denial code? Can Aussie share a rubric for the eligibility reviews, or is there another method to get timely feedback since appeals are due next week?
Thank you, Stephanie. DCPS, I believe, was actually sent notes. So beyond that, that is the only information that is available. If you need more, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you. Chelsea?
Thank you, Hassan. Let me move it forward. Hello, everyone. I'm Chelsea Charland. I'm the Science Assessment Specialist here at Aussie. So I'm just going to go through DLM as well as DC Science really quickly. So for those of you that don't know, Dynamic Learning Maps, or otherwise known as DLM, is our science assessment for those students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. This assessment is also assessed at the same grade level as DC Science. So we're looking at grade 5, grade 8, and high school biology for those students who are enrolled in high school biology. The same determination process that's used for students who are eligible to take the MSAA assessments, the same process for DLM. So any students that's found eligible in the last coming weeks or potentially with the appeals process will be eligible for the DLM assessment as well if they are enrolled in that grade or that course. In case you are looking for resources for DLM administration, there is a very handy DLM site that is specific to the District of Columbia. So it has all of our policies and all of our past information that we've shared in previous administration years. Upcoming training. So we will have a DLM specific LEA test coordinator training on January 11th. This is a virtual training. It's going to be with the vendor itself. So Aussie will be in attendance to support any policy related questions, but the DLM vendor will be conducting this training. So there will be a very large breadth of knowledge shared at that time. There's also going to be a virtual Q&A session on February 9th. So the Q&A session is more geared towards you've already started to either load your test administrators, you've already started to maybe complete your personal needs profile, and you have some questions. So the Q&A session isn't really as structured as other trainings. You're going to come in, you're going to say, I'm having this issue. Maybe can we talk about it a little bit? And then other LEAs can also come in and share their issues so that it's a little bit more collaborative space. I also just want to note here that each LEA may only designate one person as a district test coordinator in the DLM portal. I know sometimes you can have different coordinator roles for different people in the same LEA when we look at DC Science and CAN, but for DLM specifically, only one person can be the district test coordinator. If you have somebody that is supporting you in that role, they can then be the building test coordinator. So there is a way to give them a little bit more access, but we can only have one person as the DTC. Also, for those of you that did not notice from the bulletin, the Dynamic Learning Maths Test Administrator training is now available as of Monday. So you are able to now go into your DLM Moodle training portal and access your test administrator training. So the Way to access this is the same as last year. It's a little convoluted, but there's more information that can be found in the DTC training manual. So what you're going to end up doing as the district test coordinator is you'll go in, you will add any teachers or test administrators, make sure that they are marked as the role as teacher, and then those training courses will automatically populate in the Moodle page for Kite. And then there's a whole process for logging in, where they'll use the section before the @ symbol in their email as their username, and then their @ symbol will be their password to all that section beforehand. But again, it's all in the manual. So if you have any questions about how teachers can access the training site, just let me know. You can reach out to me and I can clear some things up for you. And then what's new this year is that we're holding a DLM specific test administrator training. So we did not hold this training last year. We changed our training a little bit so that we could address the needs that you guys brought up to us after the last administration season. So we're really encouraging that your test administrators come to this training on January 25th. It's virtual if it's possible. The training will be recorded and it will be posted as well if they do miss this training, but this will help with any sort of test administrator specific questions that they may have during the test lists. And then here's just some tasks for you upcoming in the next 2 months. So if you want a quick overview of things that need to happen for DLM, if you are administrating these assessments. So like I said, the DLM teaching training portal had opened on Monday. So now you can go in and have your trainings and start those for your test administrators. Beginning in 2023, Aussie is going to start enrolling grade 5 and grade 8 DLM students in Kite. These are only those students that were found eligible through the ALS assessment eligibility process. It's important to note here that LEAs will need to enroll their high school students who are eligible for ALS assessments because that is course-based. We don't really have that information. And it is a little tricky when some of the courses are not specifically biology. They might be a mix of various sciences at this level. So if you have any questions about whether or not students should be enrolled for this assessment in high school, just reach out to me and we can look at their information and figure it out together. Again, the DLM test coordinator training is on the 11th. You should work on updating your accounts and update anything that's in the DLM portal between January 16th and February 3rd. And then we'll have a test administrator training on the 25th. Anybody have any questions about DLM? Any questions in the chat?
I have a couple of questions. And I'm going back a little bit,
Mhm.
but there's a question, is the pre-ID file that's due this week just for access or for all tests? And we just want to confirm pre-ID is just specifically for access. Registration information for the other assessments will be forthcoming. And then there's a question about where can we see if any of our students are eligible for DLM? And you can answer that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, the students that are found eligible for ALS assessments, that covers both your MSAA and your DLM assessments. So if you look into your QuickBase apps, if you look into SEDS, and you can see the eligibility determination there, if they are deemed eligible for ALS assessments, then they're already under the umbrella of DLM as well. So it's not like a different portal, it's all kind of encapsulated in the same place for any sort of ALS assessment needs. Any other questions? Great. So move on to DC Science. So DC Science is our general education science assessment administered to the same grades, 5, 8, and high school biology aligned to the next generation science standards, otherwise known as the NGSS. This, I wanted to really focus on what the assessment looks like. So we've had a lot of questions just about like unit times and how do I plan? So it's here. That's weird noise. So each unit is 45 minutes long and each grade has 4 units. That's it, right? So you have some more information here too. There's 3 item clusters per unit. So a cluster essentially is we present the student with a phenomenon and they have to answer several items in that set as aligned to that one cluster phenomenon. And there's 18 items, so you can do the math there. But I do want to note for units, you can do different units over different days. So if you are testing a group of students, units 1 and 2 one day, you can go through and test them units 3 and 4 a separate day. There's no need to try to power through all 4 of these units within one day because that's very exhausting and these students are already a lot of under pressure and fatigue. So I would encourage trying to break up the units over the course of several days because they do not depend on each other. So instead of trying to clamor it all in there at the end, you can try to spread it out so they're doing several units over the course of several days. That being said, you cannot start a unit, stop it, and then go back to it a separate day. That is not something that can happen. But I do encourage that you try to schedule your units over the course of many days instead of trying to just pile in 4 45-minute units over the course of one day. I just want to remind everybody of some DC Science resources that are available to you on the Pearson support site. Two things I really want to call out specifically because I always get asked about them are our practice tests and our classroom assessment guides. So I've been asked for a lot of supports in implementing these assessments in schools. Again, the practice tests allow students to really see what these items look like, especially in grade 5 when they've never experienced what a cluster is in science. Those practice tests are really helpful. They make a very handy exit ticket, do now activity. And then the classroom assessment guides really help structure what each of the standards look like and their alignment within specific classroom instruction. So there's a lot of things on here. If you're interested in diving into the blueprints to see what percentage of different disciplinary core ideas are covered in each assessment, that's also very useful. But I just want to, again, specifically call out practice tests and classroom assessment guides, which I do every meeting, so it's probably very annoying for you at this point. And then the last thing here is just our December, January overview of tasks. So the Park DC Science LEA Test Coordinator Training and PAN 101, there is a session next week. So if you are interested in coming in person and talking to us about what to do in PAN, I suggest you try to come down here on December 14th. If you are unable to come in person, that is quite okay, because there's going to be a virtual session. You can see if I go down a little bit, January 10th, 2023, the same exact training, except this one is virtual. So if you really, really want to come in person, but you're unable to, do not fret. The information is still going to be available to you on the 10th of January in a virtual format. And if you are unable to make that training as well, it'll be posted on the Aussie Test Coordinator page with all of our other trainings. I also want to mention too that PAN will open up to LEAs on January 2nd. This is not only for DC Science, this is also for Park, right? PAN is open. Go wild, okay? Organizations should be in there. It's very, very important that you, if you've not done so already, to complete that LEA contact information that we sent out months ago. And if anything changes, to make sure that gets updated, because we pull whoever's listed as your tested coordinators and your assessment managers, we pull them into PAN. And then it's their responsibility to go in and add all of your users and verify your student registration. So if people have left, if people have changed roles, please, please let us know, because we're not going to know that. And we're not going to be able to update PAN so that your LEA has access to everything it needs to administer those assessments. Question from Natalie.
How do we update that information?
So it's been linked in a couple of the past bulletins. If you want to go back into the bulletin archive, it's been linked in there for I think 2 or 3 months. We can also share the link with you directly, make sure that it's shared. When we get closer to when this opens, we can share it again in the bulletin too, just so people can update it. And then you don't really need to fill out like every single crucial detail, but you can just like put in maybe things that have changed. A good question. Going back to the third row here, I just want to call out January 2nd to February 21st is when we're going to start putting in students. And by we, I mean Aussie, and by students, I mean grade 5, grade 8, right? So it's kind of the same rule. We don't really have that course information yet to roster and register your students for high school assessments. So we do grade 5, grade 8 for DC Science, and then the LEA is responsible for going in and making sure that high school students are registered for high school biology as indicated by their course structure. I do want to note here that non-publics have a little bit longer. You'll notice that there is until February 24th for non-publics to go in and verify the registration information as well as the personal needs profile, which is also known as the SRPMP. We do give non-publics a week longer just so that they are able to communicate with their partner organizations and their partner LEAs. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get some of those IEPs and PMP settings kind of coordinated and set between those two orgs. So LEAs have to get all of the registration done by February 21st. Non-publics need to do it by February 24th. And this is important because this is what automatically schedules materials to be shipped to your LEAs. So if there are secure materials that are ordered for specific accommodations, they will automatically be generated and shipped to your LEA after that closing date. If there's any additional materials that you need, because maybe you've got some transfers, maybe someone's IEP has changed, you are able to order those materials in an additional order window separate from this that opens in late February, March. But that's just a whole nother step you have to take. So I suggest trying to get all your registration information done as much as possible so you don't have to really burden yourself with additional order materials as much. I also want to call out the last training on here for our December, January timeline is our Park and DC Science Assessment Accommodations training. So we have session 1 and we have session 2. I think one of these in person and one of these is hybrid or virtual. So this kind of goes over all of the accommodations and accessibility features available to students taking Park and DC Science. There's a distinction there between accommodations and accessibility features. We will get into that in more detail in trainings like these. And then I also want to just voice over that we have the school test security training and test security plan overview, which are required for all of our assessments. And those will also be found on the Aussie Test Coordinator webpage. I have the registration links in here for these trainings. If you're like panicking on how to get these links, you go to the Aussie Test Coordinator page. The training calendar is there. All of our trainings are there. All of our registration links are there. So if you are unable to access that for any reason, please reach out to us. And we'll just send you everything that you possibly need. Before I hand this over to Yolanda to talk about Park, does anybody have any specific questions about DC Science or DLM in general?
There was a question about what does PAN mean, and it's been answered. It's Pearson Access Next, which is the assessment management platform for Park and DC Science, which is different from TestNav 8, which is the platform that students actually take the assessment in. For students taking access or alt access, is the LEA or non-public school responsible for enrollment? And that is a question that I would defer to Assad on regarding the pre-ID file and registration for access. Are LEAs or non-publics responsible for ensuring non-public students are on the pre-ID file?
Be that LEA would be responsible for ensuring that the students are on the pre-ID process.
Okay, so for anyone who didn't hear, there was a question in the chat about if non-publics or LEA should be responsible for making sure that students who are eligible for alt access are registered. That is the LEA responsibility using that pre-ID file. Any other questions?
No, only we did share in the chat a link to make updates to LEA test coordinator information. And we'll also make sure that it appears in the next bulletin.
Perfect. All right, Yolanda, here you go.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Yolanda Barber. I'm the math assessment specialist, and myself, along with Rachel, are your supports for the PARC assessment. So PARC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career. This assessment is aligned to the Common Core state standards, and it measures the knowledge and skills for ELA and math. Students in grades 3 through 8 and high school who are not eligible for alternate assessments will take this assessment each spring. Similar to the information that Chelsea provided for DC Science and DLM, I will also provide you information for the testing times and the field test units for the PARC assessment. The testing times remain the same as last year, but you can see on the screen here we have grades 3 through 8 for PARC Math and for PARC ELA, and it lists the number of units and the time of each unit. You will note that grade 5 for ELA has 3 units, while grades 3 and 4 have 2, and that is because grade 5 for ELA does contain a field test unit. So please keep this in mind as you're developing your test schedule. Same information for grades 6 through 8. Again, you will note that grade 8 ELA has 3 units. Again, grade 8 contains a field test unit. And lastly, the same information for high school. Here you will note that ELA 2, which is typically 10th grade, but for high school, we do go by course registration. So that is ELA 2 has an additional unit, which is also a field test unit. This slide shares some assessment resources for the park assessment. The first is a link to the Common Core state standards so that you can familiarize yourself. The evidence tables, claim structures, and blueprints for park items can be found on Aussie's site, which is linked here. Released park items can be found on our assessment vendor site, New Meridian, and the park practice tests are available on Pearson's site. We also house additional resources on the Aussie Park site, along with the results site and the test coordinator site. All of the links are on this slide. So these next steps for the park assessment are basically the same as the ones that Chelsea just gave you for DC Science. Again, I would just call out that session 1 for both the PAN 101 and the accommodations training is in person, while session 2 is a webinar option. So please register for the sessions that fit your scheduling needs. And before I turn this over to Rachel to discuss student registration, are there any questions specific to the park assessment or any information that was covered about field test units or testing times? All right, thank you all so much.
One of the big tasks listed on the 2 previous checklists was, in fact, the registration. So we'll talk very briefly about this, but our upcoming trainings, including the one on December 14th, will go into more detail. Park is, as Yolanda just said, our test for grades 3 through high school, English and math. And who takes Park is determined, as we talked about before, by the participation and performance policy. DC Science, quick reminder, is given to students in grades 5 and 8 and high school biology. So Park and DC Science registration aligns to the student's enrolled grade and or course. We take care of registering the students in grades 3 through 8 and to PAN. And then we also take care of that for science grades 5 and 8. Because high school is course dependent, we ask that LEAs take care of those high school registrations. And students with advanced coursework, you'll need to take care of as well. LEAs will need to complete their registrations for students and the personal needs profile. Those are the specific accessibility and accommodations features in the TestNav or available for students by February 1st. And non-publics, as Chelsea explained, have a little bit longer. For more on how non-publics work together with LEAs, especially in terms of test security, make sure you check out our resources. We are working on getting students uploaded into PAN organizations, LEAs, all of that. And then you will have access on January 2nd. You need to make sure that the registration is correct if you're an LEA by the 21st. And if you're registering for students by course, that will also be done by February 21st. Personal needs profiles need to be completed also by the 21st, February 21st. And then non-publics have a little bit longer to complete their registrations and profiles. That's February 24th. You need to make sure that you have the registrations complete in your PNP before you submit your test security plan. So you need to see, we need to be able to see that. And we also need to be able to make sure that the students are correctly grouped in sessions in PAN. Again, PAN is what you use, TestNav is what kids use. There are some updates for PAN for this year. New fields have been added to the file layout for deleted and disabled users. So you can restore a user if you inadvertently lost them, or as is often the case, there's faculty who's on there multiple times, whatever. I've had many a misclick with Pan, so this is actually an exciting feature. And then there's a new dashboard update, so you can drill down and show the number of students in a session and you get a bar graph on status. Students in session dashboard is bigger, which is helpful. Sometimes finding what you need on the Pan dashboard can feel frustrating, so larger is better. And organization participation has been updated. So if you're having trouble finding an organization, you will be able to sort of narrow it down a little bit more. And the text-to-speech indicator also now appears next to the students in session, which is a handy visual if you need to group or regroup for whatever reason. And it should also appear on the students roster page. TestNav has been updated, so well before testing, if you can, try and turn on those computers that you will be using and update the TestNav app. Sometimes the computers or tablets sit and need updating. And TestNav will also shut down after 20 minutes of inactivity now. Park provides us with a lot of accommodation resources. There's a lot of accessibility and accommodations built into the application itself. And our tags, or our test administration guides, can help you figure out how to apply those definitions you may see in an IEP or 504 to what a student will need in the PNP on their park test. There was an audible sigh, and I feel you on that. So make sure you're using the resources, both posted internally and those posted by Pearson, to help you navigate through this. There's a lot of clicking. I'm still clicking. We'll get to the next slide. Oh, things you can look for. Like the next slide. Here it is. So check out the test coordinator resources page as trainings begin, and as we get more materials pushed to us or ready for you, we'll make sure to post it there. So keep that handy page bookmarked. Also make sure you check out the NGA bulletins. And we will have manuals up for you on January 2nd, so you can start actually parsing out what you need for a park. There are guides available for Pearson Access Next and TestNav that will be here in this PowerPoint for you, and then we'll send it out as we go. Any questions?
There are a couple of questions in the chat, Rachel.
Okay.
I'll start with the shorter one first.
Okay.
There was a request. Oh, never mind. It's been answered. The current version of TestNav. There was a request to show that again. The current version is 8.19.302. Which has been answered in the chat, but if you want to go all the way back to that slide, you can do that as well.
It'll happen.
Go through all the clicks. There it is. And the second question was to talk a little bit more, actually, great slide to stay on, to talk a little bit more about the 20 minutes of inactivity.
Is there a specific question about the 20 minutes?
It just says, can you share more information
Oh.
about the 20 minutes of inactivity?
Yeah, essentially, if the student doesn't do anything, no using a cursor, no typing, no scrolling for 20 minutes, the student gets logged out. Yeah, it's basically if it's left idle. You can then log the student back in. So you may have a case where a student gets ill but feels better and there's still time in the session. That would be one of the few instances that I can think of where a student would be inactive but still want to log back in. No, not true. Students fall asleep at the strangest, most inopportune times. So I was like, the only instance is if they get sick, they'll fall asleep. And while, as you'll see in the manual, you can remind the student to take the test, some students are hard sleepers, so you might have to log them back in.
What,
sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
When a student is timed out using this new feature, what will the test administrator see on their end? Will it show them as exited like it does if they lose connection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there are a few of us who deal intimately with Canon. We're all nodding, so it'll show up as exited.
And then the test administrator will have to resume that student in order for them to
Yes.
log back in.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask why this functionality was added?
Is it a security issue? Security. Chelsea, do you wanna?
Yeah, it's security.
Okay,
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer. Can you say it?
that's okay. The answer was security and bandwidth.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. For those online, the tool that we use is called an owl. So it lights up when you speak and it kind of looks like an owl. So those of us here were sort of taken aback. So thank you for speaking. It was fun to see. Other questions?
Question in the chat that
Okay.
says, is there an error message that tells the student that they were logged out for inactivity? How will the student know that they will still need to finish testing?
I don't, will it have an error message or will it just be the home
It'll
screen?
log them out of TestNav and they'll be on the homepage where they are prompted to like enter their information. And
Okay.
the test administrator will be able to see that they've not. When the student logs back in, they'll also be able to see that the unit has not been submitted. They'll be able to see that they did not finish.
Okay. So to that, for those who may not have heard, it's sort of a both. It'll be returned to the home screen where they will be prompted to enter their username and password again. I will hand it off to Stephanie for further updates and resources.
And rest assured, we are actually approaching the end of the meeting a little bit early, so maybe I'll just talk a little bit slower, but also want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for any additional questions or clarifications. But what I'm going to walk through is a number of updates and resources that are available to LEAs throughout the administration season. So first and foremost, our role as the Aussie Office of Assessments is to support you all and give you the information and guidance that you need to have a successful administration. So there are a few ways that we accomplish that. One is something new that we are introducing and piloting for this year. We are calling it Aussie Assessment Ambassadors. And this is a program of regular ongoing support for LEAs that we have identified as possibly needing some extra support for a number of reasons. Some of those reasons may be that you have a brand new testing staff from 2022, and that would have been indicated on the LEA coordinator contact form that you filled out for us. If we see that everyone at an LEA is brand new to the role, we will be reaching out to offer additional guidance and support to make sure that you are keeping up with the required steps for each of the assessment to ensure that you can get all of your students tested within the assessment window. Some other reasons why we may have identified LEAs for particular extra support may have had to do with administration issues from spring 2022, including issues with timely submission of school test security plans for one or more assessments, some recurring test security incidents that were documented in 2022, or issues with chain of custody protocols, specifically returning secure materials in 2022. That said, if there were schools in your LEA that may have had a small number of incidents in 2022, that doesn't mean that you're automatically on Aussie's list. But the Aussie Ambassador Program is really meant to provide extra additional support, a helping hand with a dedicated member of the Office of Assessments staff. So you have a point of contact to get quick answers from if you need them. Part of the ambassador support program is to document a plan of action with the LEAs in partnership with Aussie to ensure that you are staying on track for preparation and administration of spring 2023 assessments. Those LEAs that we have identified for this pilot will be contacted later this week. And your ambassador will be doing that to introduce themselves to you and to also begin making a plan for holding those meetings and providing that support. And for those LEAs who may not have been identified by Aussie as in need of additional support through the ambassador program, we do offer still technical assistance bookings, which we introduced last year. But this is handled through a Microsoft bookings page. So there are a number of topics that you can select for additional support. So if you really have a specific question about this one thing in PAN, you would select, when you're signing up for a booking, you would select the Pearson Access Next and SRP&P support. And what that will do is allow you to select a time to meet with a Aussie assessment member who has specialized knowledge of that particular topic. So each of these topics are assigned to Aussie assessment members who are the best people to support you in that category of question. The link to sign up for those bookings is live, and I believe it actually has been live since last year. The link is on the slide. We'll also make sure that it goes out in the bulletin, and it will also be in the slides when you receive them after this meeting. But one thing that we do request is that if you are signing up for technical assistance booking, please include at least a couple of sentences or notes about specifically what your questions are so that we can be prepared to support you efficiently and effectively when we do meet. And those bookings will look for, the system looks for free time on the calendar of the Aussie assessment member who you are trying to reach. Sometimes our calendars don't show as free for whatever reason. So if you're having trouble booking a specific time and you really need assistance, please do feel free to email us and we can set up a separate time outside of the bookings if you can't find one through this method that works for your schedule. Any questions? Anything in the chat, folks?
There is some discussion and concern around the invalid, the inactive time for 20 minutes. I don't know that there are questions that need to be addressed right now, but possibly questions that you could follow up with LEAs or everyone with a response. And a request for the share of the booking information. And I'm dropping that in the chat now.
Thank you. And one thing I will note about the 20 minutes and inactivity is that it is something that is implemented on Pearson's end. Pearson is the vendor for Park and DC Science, and it's not necessarily something that we have selected, but we can talk with Pearson about more about their rationale and how it actually looks in practice and get you more information about that. Getting toward our closing here, I just wanted to again remind folks of engagement opportunities with Aussie over the next several months. We have regularly scheduled NGA meetings every other month. You'll note that our next meeting is February 7th, which is why this meeting included a lot of information about what needs to happen between now and February, because that will be the next opportunity for us to talk to you as a large group. And you will see that between February and June, there are no regularly scheduled NGA meetings because that is the time that assessment administration is happening. So you will still continue to receive NGA bulletins and important information from our team during that time, but we won't have a scheduled NGA meeting until June after assessment administration has ended. Our proposed or tentative topics for those NGA meetings are listed on this slide. February will again focus heavily on test administration and test security reminders, registration reminders, and testing materials will start to arrive in LEAs for access in February, and then for other assessments in March for Park and DC Science. So the February meeting will be, again, what's happening now, what should you be focusing on, what can you expect in the coming weeks as we get into the high time of administration season. The June meeting will focus largely on closeout and test security reminders, and we will likely share at that point draft assessment schedule for 2024. Because even though it seems really far away, we know it's really important for you all to have that information early for your planning purposes. So we do share draft calendars in the June meeting for your awareness. And then come August of 2023, which simultaneously feels really far away, but also not that far, we will get into reporting of assessment results from spring 2023 and give updates on individual student report delivery. One of the best ways to keep in touch with us and keep apprised of what's going on in assessment is to register for the NGA bulletin. To be part of the NGA bulletin list automatically, eSchool Plus is on here, but that is an old slide that we'll need to update. The I can't recall the name exactly, but it's like LEA all contacts information that's submitted to the Aussie's Office of the Chief Information Officer is how we will pull names for the distribution of the NGA bulletin. So if you in that all contacts roster are listed as one of the roles you see here, you will automatically receive the NGA bulletin. That's the LEA assessment manager, MSAA coordinator, access coordinator, or assessment point of contact. If you are not on that all contact sheet, you can reach out to the data manager at your LEA to get you added to that. And if you are outside of an LEA, for example, at a non-public or an external partner and would wish to receive the bulletin, you can reach out to our team at aussie.assessment@dc.gov, and we will make sure that you're getting that information every time it goes out. But I will say, I know you get a lot of information from Aussie, a lot of emails. I know that bulletin is also often a very long email, but it really does have important information that we would like folks to make sure that they are reading thoroughly and keeping up with deadlines. So I know it's just one more thing to read, but please, please, please take the extra few minutes to make sure that you're looking at NGA Bulletin for upcoming actions and deadlines. With that, I will pause again. Any questions? I feel like we have some extra time, so I can draw it out. Yes, Natalie. Great question. So the question in the room was, will the health assessment, it's called Health and Physical Education Assessment, HPEA, will it be given this year? That assessment is managed by a different division in Aussie, the Division of Health and Wellness. My understanding that they do intend to administer it for this year and should be providing additional information about that window in upcoming months. And for those who may be new, the HPEA is administered to students in, I believe, grades 5 and 8 across the district. Okay, well, I will leave you all with a slide that has some important contact and resource information for each of the individual assessments, as well as where you can go on Aussie's website for general information like test coordinator resources, test security information, and an overview of our statewide assessment. Our team at Aussie can stay in the room for a few minutes if folks in person have questions, but for those of you online, on behalf of the Aussie Office of Assessments team, just wanted to thank you for your time today, and thank you in advance for all of the work that we know will be going into a successful 2023 administration. If you do have additional questions for us, please do don't hesitate to reach out to us via email at aussie.assessment@dc.gov, and we'll make sure that your questions get to the right team member. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you. Thanks. Okay, then.